Well, hello and welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is chapter 10 of The Last Battle. Who will go into the stable?
I say nay.
Well, so it sounds like that might be something that might be what some of the animals can only now say.
Yeah.
Potentially. We got one animal struck dumb.
They have been downgraded.
They've gone back to the Pokemon level where you only can say your name over again. This is why, by the way, Digimon was so much better when we were kids.
No, it was not.
Oh my gosh,
Please
yes.
Don't say that kind of thing without running it by me first.
You don't want to post it in the podcast.
Did you have a Zune growing up?
No. I had an iPod.
Okay, good.
But no, Digimon was way better. I was really into it as...
Can you imagine if you had to tell people we had a Zune cast? There's a world out there.
There's another dimension where people are making Zune casts because that's... Was it Microsoft that was behind that?
Yeah.
Was that okay?
It's interesting because Microsoft has such a grip on most of the computers out there, but they cannot make a media player or a phone.
Oh yeah, Windows Media Player. That thing was like the bane of my existence back on Windows XP. Do you remember how cool Windows XP was?
Yeah, I had Windows 98.
Well, no,
but I didn't have Service Pack 2. No, when you had XP, I probably
you were
still
still
had
on
Windows.
98 is what you're saying. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm like, no,
I didn't have Service Pack 2,
that.
which is what would allow you to play any game, so I could only play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. The Pro Skater 3, wow, we were really veering off topic here. I guess we'll never find out who goes into that stable. But was it Pro Skater 3 that you could be Wolverine and Darth Maul? I believe it was Pro Skater.
Was 4.
Was it 4? It was one that came out like in 2000 or 1999. It was right around then.
Oh, then maybe. Yeah.
I think it was on... Was it on the N64?
It was on all the stuff. And it was on PC.
The first
Nintendo.
PlayStation, maybe?
I think that by 3 it was on GameCube, though.
Oh, okay. So maybe I'm a little off, but
this isn't going to make it.
Yeah, it might. Who knows? It's the last season. People are sad that we're ending with the not we're ending, but the Chronicles of Narnia are ending. So maybe they just want us to drag it out a little bit. So let's come back to chapter 10 next episode. Let's just talk about video games between 1998
We're going to talk about a
2003.
different series that also had 7 iterations.
No, there was like 45,000 iterations.
I think there was
of Tony
8.
Hawk.
I think the Tony Hawk 8 was Proving Ground.
There was the Underground games too, where they were like role playing games.
That's counting. I'm counting those.
Oh, okay.
There's Tony Hawk 1 through 4, and then there's all the Underground ones, and then he came out with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 8.
What's pretty funny about this is I believe that neither you or I have ever ridden a skateboard.
Oh, I have.
No, like I've
not in a cool way at all.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah. Sorry.
And it had a handle.
I have been. Oh, that doesn't count. No, I've been on a skateboard, but never for longer than 10 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
When I was a freshman in college, people got into longboarding because we're in the city, and so it was an urban campus, and so people would longboard all over the place or bike. And at first, I was like, well, longboard's cheaper, and one of my roommates had one, so I just was like, oh, I'm not going to bike everywhere. I'm going to longboard everywhere. And about 3 or 4 times of just eating it, literally leaving the dorm, I was like, I think I'm just going to go buy a bike. Yep. Like I remember
there was one guy who had inline skates, and he would zip past all of us on the way to class, and we thought, man, that is really cool. And then one day the timing worked out where we passed him right as we were right up to the building. We said, man, you must get everywhere super fast. He goes, yeah, hasn't worked out the way I thought it would. And we said, why not? He goes, well, I spend like 6 minutes putting on my skates.
Taking them off when
and then I spend another 6 minutes once I get there taking them off. And my walk was like 13 minutes. So it actually takes them longer.
Well, let's actually try to head back to chapter 10 here of The Last Battle. This question of who will go into the stable, it's one that is asked by our protagonist, our antagonist, this large crowd of both Narnians and Calormans. And this chapter, really interestingly, has this mystery of what is going on inside the stable really kind of take over the narrative. For this chapter, and we'll see maybe in the next chapter, who knows, we have the idea of what exactly is going on is now kind of the biggest plot point as opposed to this battle between, for the end of Narnia. Right now, everybody is confused. At the beginning of this chapter, the antagonists, the Rishtatar Khan, Ginger the cat, and Shift maybe a little bit lesser Shift, but at least those other two seem to be fully in charge, know exactly what they're doing. last chapter ended with Schiff saying, hey, if you see a donkey out there, that's a fake Aslan, really foiling the plans of King Tyrion here. And then by the end of this chapter, everyone is confused.
Yep. This is probably the most difficult place that I've been in our podcast in terms of wanting to move forward.
Sure.
And part of it is I prepared for this chapter last time.
Yeah, you like showed up for the last one. We were doing chapter 9. You're like,
right,
because we were doing chapter 10.
No, we had bumped chapter 9. I had misremembered that, and so luckily I was still prepared for that. Then I was ready for chapter 10, but we weren't able to do it that time. And then we had to wait a week.
Yeah.
And then wait a few days. And so I've prepared for this one multiple times, and I haven't moved forward yet. And I'm really curious what happens after this.
Well, since you've read this chapter so many times then, why don't you go ahead and do our chapter summary, Phil, for chapter 10.
All right, here we go. Jill, Puzzle, and the others listen as the ape continues to spin lies, claiming that Tashlan won't be coming out to see them anymore. When challenged, Schiff offers for them to go in to see Tashlan in the stable, but only one at a time, while also implying that there is a significant risk of being eaten. The beasts of Narnia start to back away, but Ginger the cat surprises everyone by volunteering to go in, then flying back out in terror, reduced to only making the noises of a regular cat. Emeth, an officer in the Tisrock's army, then enters to see Tashlan, and appears to die upon being thrown out. Finally, as a boar is about to be forced at sword point to go in, Tyrion can stand it no longer and charges forward, with the other 6 close behind him.
All right. You've made an interesting choice here, and not one that I disagree with. I'm curious.
Is it the appears to die upon being thrown out?
Yeah, so you are assuming that even though this body looks different, we're not told that it is a different person. We're told that the body looks different, and Emeth still hasn't come out. You were assuming that Emeth is dead.
No, I'm saying he appears to die.
You're just saying he appears to other people to die.
Yes.
I thought you were saying to us as readers he appears to die.
No. The appearance is given off that he died.
Okay.
But I intentionally did not say that he died because we have evidence to the contrary.
Yeah, there's so many things that could have happened here. It could be that he's just still in there. It could be that he's dead and a different body is thrown out.
Or maybe he's no longer a talking beast.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also could legitimately be that whatever body has come out is him. But it's, like I think about the end of Last Crusade, right? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Okay, sometimes I'm like, is that too inside baseball? Is that like?
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Mm-hmm. This was not the first.
Is this the one with the fridge?
No, this is not. That's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This is the one with the Holy Grail. You legitimately haven't seen it.
I don't believe I have. I think I've only seen Raiders. What is a huge
bummer is I legitimately was going to bring it up a different time in this chapter, but now I can't because you haven't seen it. Dude, it came out in the 80s, man.
I'll get to it.
Have you seen Temple of Doom first? Because you got to see Raiders, then Temple of Doom, then
I don't think
Last
I have.
Crusade.
Where's the one where he says, look away, don't look. That's Raiders.
The end of Raiders. When
I think that's the only one I've seen.
Well, it's a really good one, but you should also watch the rest of them.
Yeah.
Even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there's some fun parts.
You want to just watch it right now?
I mean, I kind of do. Like, I can't believe you haven't seen Indiana Jones. All the Star Wars references we get. Lucasfilm also makes Indiana Jones, and you haven't. Okay.
I've seen a lot of Spielberg stuff, but not all the Spielberg stuff.
This is when I asked you if you wanted to go see the 5th Indiana Jones movie. You were like pretty adamantly no, and that's because you just would have been confused by everything happening. You're like,
yeah, I have.
Like I've only seen.
I'd
the
have
first
to watch
one.
2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not to give away too much from Last Crusade, but I was wondering, like, is this something where he has been aged very quickly? To the point where he is aged and then almost died, maybe of old age, or just time has changed or something. We know that time changes weirdly in Narnia. Has he entered in, and then when he comes out, he's dead? I mean, it's unclear what has happened to this character. And what a credit to Lewis that we, as readers, seem to care about this character who we literally meet halfway through this chapter.
Yep.
And it seems as though also our heroes care about him. There's a great line near the end of the chapter, which I'll go ahead and try to find it now, where I believe it's Jewel who says something along the lines of, he deserves a better God than Tash. His faith. He deserves something better than the God that he's been given through Tash, which is just such a great... I really like that moment here. Yeah, he is worthy of a better God than Tash, is what Jewel whispers in the king's ear.
Wow.
But let's go back to the beginning here. Let's go back, and this chapter picks up right where the last one left off. At the end of the last chapter, Shift had kind of really undercut the plan of our 7 Narnian heroes here by, as Jill recognizes it, kind of spinning a good mixture of little truth with a lie that was it made the lie far stronger. That's kind of how Lewis communicates that. This little bit of truth makes the lie far stronger. And this continues at the very beginning of this chapter, where Jill, she just kind of turns around and she starts just taking off the lion skin off of Puzzle. And the tension here, the two really, one's quite tragic and one's stressful, is getting this off very quickly in case at any moment they're found, they need to get rid of this thing, right? They got to get rid of the lion skin so they won't be caught. If there's any hope of still convincing them that there was no Aslan, they no longer can, or this wasn't Aslan at the beginning, they can't rely on Puzzle for this. And then the tragic thing is the fact that this was supposed to be the gotcha moment. This was supposed to be, yes, we have Puzzle, he will prove it. And as she takes this off, it's like, there goes our hope. She's stripping the donkey of all the hope that they have, and then just piles it up in the bush, because what else is going to be done?
Right. One thing I enjoy about this is we really thought we had a solution. We knew based on where we were in the book that it wasn't time to wrap everything up. Mm-hmm. And so the solution doesn't work out, and now it actually becomes a problem. And it's this great, the pendulum is swinging, and you have a crisis and the crisis gets solved. You have another crisis and it's a little bit more than last time. And then you have a solution. And this time you thought you were about to resolve everything, and it actually has made it worse. So now we're swinging back the other way.
And you even can amplify that, because within the first page or two, Shift also says, Tashlin, as he keeps reminding everyone, he has gotten really frustrated. He's not coming out anymore. He's very angry with all of y'all. He's not coming out. And it is Griffle, the chief dwarf, who speaks up again. I don't think he's purposefully lying here, but with a little bit of truth that, again, makes this lie stronger. He says, no. He never had anything except an old donkey with a lion skin on its back. Now he's lost that, and he doesn't know what to do. Interestingly, is that this is exactly the truth, a truth that Griffle learned back in chapter 7, right? When Tyrion appeared, it was like, look, this is Puzzle. And Griffle is like, we've had enough of your gods. We're done. Yeah. We're not following you anymore. And he's bringing this kind of cynicism now to Shift. And it's somewhat undercutting Shift, while at the same time potentially strengthening the Narnians' belief of, we can't trust what the dwarves are saying. So if the dwarves are saying, hey, he never existed at all, well, then they must be wrong. They're cynical. They're the atheistic characters. Maybe that might be stretching the supposal too far. But in some ways, for the Narnians, it makes Shift's story more believable because the dwarves don't believe in it.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
It's really, everything is just unraveling horrifically for our heroes here.
It also doesn't seem like it is boding very well for Shift either.
Yes.
His headaches are getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. He's trapping himself, and he's running out of stuff. But it does seem like they have one more trick up their sleeves. And I'm not even sure how much Ginger knew going into this. Mm-hmm. And it's also a little, it's difficult for me in a good way as a reader when someone goes and then they never saw him again. Mm-hmm.
Like that story's over.
That is very final.
Ginger's story is done.
And it leaves me wondering. So I'm curious what is in there, and because we know for a fact that they never hear from Ginger again.
Yeah. Well, before we head off to Ginger, because we have so much to talk about here, let's just take a step back, because there is this interesting shift with the ape here.
You just can't help yourself.
I was trying to be a little bit like you, just trying to be more subtle about it, though. Actually, you're very subtle about it. It's a little different if you're not See, I'm always like laughing very obnoxiously on the other end. So hey, let's try it again. Then you laugh at my pun.
Okay.
There's a shift with the ape. Oh, mine's usually better than that, but okay. So there is this shift where he goes from not, he's really like a cult leader at this point. And if you think about the kind of dynamic, I remember taking a class on, on new religious movements, as they were called in this class. It's mostly a course focusing on cults, and back in college. And there's there's two kinds of leaders of cults. And there's the leader who completely knows that what they're selling is fake, right? They know that, behind closed doors, they're very open, like, hey, y'all, we're just getting these people, right? Just, pay up and we'll do whatever for you, or we'll say this is going to happen. And then there's the leaders who fully believe in what they're doing, right? And there's an interesting argument, not one that we're going to have here, about which one of those two is more dangerous, right? The person who really believes what they're doing, or the person who knows it's all fake. Shift has been completely believing that everything is fake. I mean, he uses that lightning, right, at the beginning of chapter 1, or at the end of chapter 1, of saying, oh no, I said that Aslan would give us a sign of lightning, right? But now, by the end of this chapter, he's switched to be the other kind of leader who seems to fully believe in what's happening just because all these bad things are happening. And this is what I think Lewis meant when he was warning, or I think through Tyrion's words of, if you call on these demons, they will really show up and you will regret it, right?
Yeah.
Shift is now seeing those demons come to haunt him, and it's terrifying.
Yeah. It's interesting how it has flipped, and he was in such power, and now he's doing almost exactly the same things, but the power has gone past him. He's lost control of it. And now it, in a way, is controlling him. He, for some reason, can't say no to adding this extra part with Ginger the cat, and there's some plan, but he has a headache. He's not thinking clearly, it seems, and it's also not going the way he wanted.
And he still has this little bit of menace to him, in that even in all of his failings in this chapter, he's still telling a little bit of the truth, and very little at this point. But the idea that he's telling is that, hey, Aslan, or Tashlan, but let's just say Aslan in this sense, Aslan isn't safe. That actually is true. Don't go in there. And this is even like a biblical thing. Don't go into the Holy of Holies, right? I mean, we don't know what's in there, but let's say Aslan really is in there. Now, we have had face-to-face meetings with Aslan. So, again, this is a supposal, not an allegory. Yeah. But
man, it sure seems like the temple. And
doesn't it?
Tie a bell on a string. And
if listeners really wants to talk a little bit more about that, I'm just going to hold off, because we'll find more about this later. I think
there's more coming.
There's more coming, especially there might be some people listening who wants to talk more about Emeth than we're going to today, and that's going to happen in the future. For some of these things, because you really have no idea where we're going, we'll keep any conversations that I felt like, hey, we really can't have this conversation till its fullest extent. We'll just wait till, I think those last 2 or 3 episodes for us are going to be quite long, because there's a lot of things, even like from this chapter, we'll finally want to unpack when you have all the knowledge there.
Okay.
But, there is this little bit of truth of, like, if you go into this, what is somewhat like a Holy of Holies here, in to see the lion, it's not safe. He might just gobble you up. Well, there's literal people who have to be pulled out by the rope, right?
Yeah.
In the temple, because of the presence of God. And so there is some truth here to this. It's very little, but it still makes him dangerous as a character. There's also something interesting with these lies that Shift is spinning. And I mentioned not too long ago that Anna and I were reading through The Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius. And in book 1, there is a really interesting exchange that made me think about what's happening here. So I know you and I were talking about this before. I know you haven't read, and a lot of people honestly haven't read Boethius. So the background of this is that Boethius is writing this about the 500 years after Jesus. So kind of think about that. So I believe it's in the 5th century. I think it's in the end of the 400s, but I could be wrong. If I open my book up here, the the copyright date is not super helpful.
Oh, yeah. Because it's in Roman numerals.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I can't read it. So I might be wrong. Forgive me if I am. But so Boethius is imprisoned by Theodoric, who's a Goth. And in the story, he's writing this very sad poem about his difficult circumstances being imprisoned, and he's visited by Lady Philosophy. And Lady Philosophy is this personification of philosophy and wisdom, right? And I believe that we spoke a little bit about this with Dr. Baxter. I know we mentioned Lewis as the British Boethius, but I can't remember how much we actually talked about the text itself. But really early on in this exchange between the two, Boethius, the character of Boethius here, notices some of the rags that Lady Philosophy is wearing. There's this weird thing where she's wearing these really beautiful garments, but they've been torn up a little bit. And when he finds out why, Lady Philosophy says this. She says, "They grabbed me too as their prey while I shouted and struggled against them, and they ripped this garment of mine, which I had woven myself. As they went away with some little shreds torn from it, they thought that I had yielded myself completely to them. Since these men were seen with little bits of my clothing, they were foolishly assumed to be my friends. How many of them were destroyed by the errors of the crowd." This is really great, right? These different kind of philosophical movements or groups, right, that are claiming to teach the truth. They only have a portion of it. Yeah. And even literally 1,500 years ago, right, you have a philosopher and a writer like Boethius pointing out, and obviously Lewis was very, very familiar with this text, pointing out the danger of what's happening with shift, right? Being able to present, and Richard Tarkhan, being able to present just a portion of the truth means that you can probably fool people pretty easily. And I don't mean fool in like a condescending way. I'm talking about myself here, right? Yeah. You know, I'm putting myself in the hooves of the Narnians, right? That, oh my goodness, how often can I be confused by something, right, or misinformed because there's a hint of truth. And just like you see in this metaphor that we get through Lady Philosophy, you're holding the garments of her dress, and so people go, well, that's philosophy, that's truth there, and I'm going to fall for it. And I think Lewis is very much thinking about this when he's writing this exchange here.
Yeah, I'm just still focusing on that story. That's really cool.
Yeah.
How far are you and Anna in that?
We only just recently finished book 1. Which is about, I don't know, 30, 40 pages in. You know, when you have a 3-year-old and then a soon to be born at any moment little girl on the way, we get about 2 or 3 pages a night, and then we talk a little bit about it, and then we both go to bed either on the couch or we might hopefully make it upstairs. But it's been slow going, but it's been enjoyable. And I think I told you we've also been rereading Lord of the Rings together, because that felt like, hey, and this season we're moving into as a family of 4 and everything, I don't know that Boethius will be the great like nighttime, because a lot of times we'll read in bed before we go to sleep, and I don't know that Boethius is going to be there. It'll be weird too, because then we'll have the bassinets, and then we can't read in our bed anymore, and so we're like,
because you don't want her to overhear Boethius.
Yeah, we just felt like for the little girl that it's not quite appropriate yet for her. Oh. Not like it has anything inappropriate in it, but just I don't want to think too much about this, but I'm just not sure that she's capable of it as a newborn. You know, I think Boethius is really.
This is from the same person who read all 7 Chronicles to his son.
No, I did not. I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and only The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Although this is kind of
when
fun.
He was 2 months old.
It was all before he was a year.
Okay.
I will say I'm not going to do this with kid number 2. Not because like, oh, it's not the first kid, not like that, but because I've learned my lesson, which is that I was really excited. I was like, I'm going to read to our oldest. I'm going to read all 7, like I said I was going to do. I'm going to read all 7 Chronicles of Narnia. Well, we got through 1 book in a year because I was either too tired or I just realized, oh, like this just isn't working. So he would still hear it, but I was like, this isn't, like, it's more fun to read the picture books, because as soon as he was actually, able to see what was in front of him, even if he was, 3 months old, it was like, oh, this is more fun, and he's enjoying it more than a single small Pauline Baines illustration.
Right.
But what has been fun is recently we were just driving to Charlottesville this past weekend, and he wanted to listen to an audiobook. And a lot of times I have the story of Star Wars, not an audiobook, but these came out in 77, 80, and 83. There were records that, back when you couldn't go out and buy VHS really easily, they turned the books into these like 40-minute, little kind of like an audiobook before you had, books on tape. This is books on record, movies on record. But I was like, you know what, buddy, I want to try something different than that, or maybe like one of your story time little podcasts or something. Let's do The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we have that board book, so he kind of knows what it is.
Yeah.
And we had just been recently, we moved him out of the Narnia nursery so we could get ready for the little girl in the Narnia nursery. And he was asking questions about we have a painting my sister-in-law did of Aslan that's beautiful. We have a lamppost in there, and so he was asking some questions. And I was like, well, let's go back to that story because we read it sometimes, but I don't know that you've fully made that connection. That's this room, this room. And so
the podcast that your dad does,
and I said that's like, so this is
pays
also
for all of this.
Yeah, I know. But it's like, because sometimes. Not with me as much, but when he's with my parents sometimes, they'll listen to the podcast with him. He's like, oh, that's kind of cool. He gets to hear Daddy, right? But he asked if we could listen to the book. And I was like, well, I don't know how much you would love the Michael York kind of. It's like 3.5 hours long. I don't know how much it's really going to, take. But I was like, what we could do is we have the audio dramas. So we listened to the radio theaters. We listened to Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe Part 1, and he was really into it.
I bet.
He kept asking when's, because we have a little book of saints too. And we read, if it's a day that commemorates a certain saint, we'll read that. But it's usually we read whatever saint it is, and then we also read Saint Nicholas. So I was like,
that's his favorite one.
His favorite one. And so I did tell him, I was like, hey, buddy, in this story, Saint Nicholas shows up. He's like, Saint Nicholas shows up. I'm like, yeah, he's in this story.
Oh,
so we didn't quite get to that, or maybe we did. Now I'm forgetting at the end of the drive if we'd gotten there or not, if we just talked about it. But so that was really fun to finally introduce him to the radio theater. I think in the next year we're going to go through. Bless you. I think in the next year we will get to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like actually as a read aloud, which is exciting.
Fun.
This is a long tangent. I apologize, but
I'm still trying to picture you playing the vinyl record he requested in the car.
No. I then also, because he liked that record so much, I found a digital copy of it, and that's on my phone, and we can listen to that as well. Yeah.
That makes more sense.
It's more fun if we put it on the record player, but
yeah.
But
then you have to have this whole like spring contraption to make sure that it doesn't bounce and skip.
Oh, in the car and stuff.
Yeah.
You got me a fun Star Trek. Well, not me. You got Harris a fun Star Trek record. It was kind of for me too.
It was for both of you.
You found a cool Star Trek record we listened to because he's been.
Oh, you listened to it already?
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice. How was it?
It was fun. It's a lot of those, not just Star Trek-y things, but a lot of those, we're going to take a story in the 50s, or I guess it was 60s, in the 60s, turn it into a thing. It's like the best scripts don't make it to, like, the best scripts were produced for TV,
right.
Yeah.
There's
one of, like, the Adam West and whoever played Robin, but, like, the Batman, where they did a couple of vinyl, they would do a couple, like, audio recordings, and it's like, man, you've probably seen the show too. It's like, if the script wasn't good enough to make it into that show, which is pretty much they'd let any script. I mean, how many times does Batman get attacked by sharks in that TV show?
Especially that.
Then it's not a great script. So it was still fun, but it's a little silly. But he loves it. He loves the Enterprise. He's obsessed with the Enterprise.
I love how much that has changed. Have you listened to the Batman audio drama on Spotify?
I know it exists, but I've not listened to it.
No, I haven't listened to the whole thing, but just the quality of the production, the voices being used, the sound effects, they have a radio announcer who it sounds like they're really a radio announcer, but they're talking about Gotham. They're talking to an audience in Gotham, and it's so different than audio kind of being like the thing that we'll do to get a little extra money. We'll release it on vinyl.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, I think, it came across as much more commercial in the past. Now it's like we have to have the best content in order to get people to stay on our platform. So we're going to pay to produce this.
Yeah, that's true.
In the hopes that people will enjoy it.
Well, I think we've gotten to through a lot of this discussion of shift. So why don't we actually go ahead and transition to Ginger the cat here? Because at this point in the chapter, Ginger, he asks who's going to volunteer and come up here, right? You might get eaten alive. And Ginger kind of struts forward and volunteers and walks into
in a very cool manner.
Yes. Cool as a cucumber, mutters Eustace, Slightly, feels slightly anachronistic to me to have Eustace say that. It just doesn't feel like people said that 70 years ago.
That's Eustace remembering that he is from another part of the. That's a phrase from his world.
Do you think that maybe like we know that back in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he was really into insects and other things. Do you think this was one of the nonfiction books? He was like really into cucumbers
and the actual temperature.
Yeah,
inside
I had a
a
cousin
cucumber.
who was really into pickles, like all the different things you could pickle. You know, you ever heard someone getting really into this kind of stuff, like or mushrooms too? People get really into mushrooms.
Was their last name Olive?
No. Although Mount Olivet is not far from where your grandparents live, right?
Yeah, I drove past the entire Mount Olive University, and
the first time, this is true for listeners, okay, who, I don't know if this is a brand that's outside of America, but Mount Olive are really famous. Pickles, do they do anything else besides pickles? Mostly pickles.
That's the main thing I know of.
Eastern North Carolina, there is a Mount Olive University.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's actually associated with the pickles. It's just the name of the place it comes from, right?
It sure seems like there was a lot of.
I think they are the pickles, though. Like I think that's their mascot. But I always just
really
assumed it was like, hey, let's just pick the pickles because we're here. But it's got a. I mean, it's not a big.
Florida
college.
has Gatorade. We have pickles.
Yeah.
Pickle
That's
juice.
how it works. Yeah. Do you know that I had a friend who went to Florida State, and as far as I've heard, and what he's told me before is that in Tallahassee you can't find Gatorade anywhere. It's all Powerade because it's their big rival is Florida. So they just like everyone drinks Powerade there. Ginger, cool as a cucumber, comes up, goes inside, and then screams. And I assume that you listen to Patrick Stewart scream.
Oh man, you beat me to it. I've been waiting to bring this up for 2 weeks. There is nothing like hearing Patrick Stewart imitate a cat in terror. I wonder how many takes that was. I wish they would release a bonus of him doing all the different versions. You want me to do a little more shrieky? Do you want me to cough up a hairball while I do it?
A lot of people don't know this, but when you study to be a Shakespearean actor, there's a lot of cat sounds you have to make, and so they learn that.
It's funny that you bring up Shakespeare. To me, it's just Professor Xavier would never.
Or you think like, oh, this is the Star Trek thing. He's like, maybe in one of those TNG episodes, like, do you think he was ever a cat at some point? Probably. I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen most of them. Maybe there's one that I missed where he was a cat and he really got to practice that. That's the Borg do that. When he gets turned into a Borg. Spoiler alert from the 91.
Those are the little furry things?
No, those are the Tribbles. That's from
Tribbles.
Man, a little bit of Star Trek tonight. Tribbles are from the original series, which your wife is a huge fan of.
Yes.
But ironically, and I've always teased Sarah about this, she only likes the original series and nothing that came after it, really. She doesn't dislike it, but like she only watches that. I'm more of a 90s Trek and newer Trek kind of guy. But the Tribbles are back then. It's the Borg are the robot-looking creatures. They're like one big collective. Oh. You can come over and watch some Star Trek with me.
I guess so.
We've been over this before. Have you? Strange New Worlds, man. It's really good Star Trek.
Yeah?
Yeah. Paramount Plus. I know no one has it. Get rid of your Apple TV and watch Paramount Plus. You can watch Survivor with me, The Amazing Race, and Star Trek.
When you told me about Paramount Plus, I thought, who in the world is subscribing to this? And then I read the list. And I thought, I'm not interested in any of these shows, but Daniel is interested in all of them.
Paramount Plus, I'm not
there
joking.
Really is a streaming platform for everyone.
Paramount Plus is the streaming platform that we watch the most in this household.
Yeah.
It's because it has Star Trek, Amazing Race, and Survivor. So that's,
To me, it's the shopping center that has nothing I'm interested in.
Sure.
TJ Maxx.
It's like a Ross or something. You're like,
right.
what is here?
A cram school.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to come over and watch it, you're welcome to. So Ginger runs away. And what we learn here, as some of the Narnian animals and Rishta Tarkatan, try to speak to Ginger, is that Ginger has lost the ability to speak. Shift is saying, "Oh, my head, he's overwhelmed and stuff." And as people try to talk, Ginger can make out nothing. I is the first thing gets out, almost trying to like maybe actually speak, and then it transforms and nothing more than a cat. What's really terrifying about this scene is that Lewis points out to us, he writes this, everyone saw that it was true, meaning that Ginger has become a dumb beast. And then the greatest terror of all fell upon those Narnians. For every one of them had been taught, when only a chick or a puppy or a cub, how Aslan at the beginning of the world had turned the beast of Narnia into talking beasts, and warned them that if they weren't good, they might one day be turned back again and be like the poor witless animals one meets in other countries. This is a really interesting inverse, the kind of the tragic version of the myth became fact. This Lewis's great idea of that's what Jesus Christ is. The myth become history, or the myth becoming fact. This is again a myth or a legend coming fact, that kind of this story handed down that, hey, if you don't, you've got to imagine that there are some Narnian mother or father saying, hey, if you don't behave, you're going to turn back into a dumb beast. Do you want to be a dumb beast? This is like what I would do if I was a Narnian, parent. This might come out in maybe not one of my better moments as a parent, and it actually happens. Maybe like when he tells hey, if you keep making that face, it's going to get stuck like that.
Right.
This cat actually turns back into a dumb beast, and the horror that must come from the rest of the animals, like, oh my goodness, if we don't behave or if we don't do things right, he really will just turn us back into this.
Right. And the desire is to not have that. It's very strong because it creates such a feeling of fear among them.
Mm-hmm.
I also am curious, is Ginger aware that they used to be able to speak? Are they truly, have they lost their awareness and any higher brain function that was going on, and they just can't get the words out
That's
anymore?
a great question. Well, I mean, what do you think before I answer?
I feel like they are just back to being a dumb beast.
Yeah, completely. Like, no.
They don't have memories.
Not
of it
just someone who's mute, but you're saying actually no longer intelligent in that form.
Yes,
I agree. I think we hear that. I think it still happens quickly, but not immediately, because it seems as if maybe Ginger is kind of aware of what's happening, slowly losing this ability to both think cognitively, right, like he once did, but also lose the ability to speak. And I think there's also a line, right, where Lewis says that he even starts looking more like a dumb beast, which I take to mean maybe shrinking, as we established that the talking beasts are slightly larger, that he's kind of going back. And I think the fact that we never see him again has much less to do we also know that Narnia's ending, so let's keep that in mind. But I think it has less to do with some horrific end that he has, and more just, well, what does a dumb beast have to do with everything happening at the stable? He just wanders off.
Yeah.
I get the sense that, Ginger climbs up into the tree, and then once he has fully reverted back to being just a regular cat, just just does cat things and wanders on his own.
Yeah.
Which is almost like worse than just, hey, you no longer can speak, but you can think. No, it's like you've completely lost the ability. This gift that Aslan had given to you is no longer there.
Yeah.
What do you think? And I know this is going to be hard for you. What do you think happened to Ginger?
Afterwards?
No, what caused this cat to lose the ability to be a talking beast?
I see. Yeah. And I've wondered a few things, and none of them feel exactly quite right, but I've wondered if there's nothing in there and it's this final act of trying to trick that Aslan just kind of steps in and actually
the cat's almost like, he's been smited. Is that smoted?
Right. Because
there's some smiting that occurs.
he was not
smitten. Sorry, keep going though.
We've heard about beasts becoming dumb again.
Yes,
at one
back in
point.
Caspian, correct.
And I wonder if this is just a sped up version of that, where, hey, here are the rules. If you don't follow the rules, then you'll be reverted instantly at some point, and you won't know when it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The other thought, this one feels a little more likely, is whatever that creature was that they think may have been Tash.
Okay.
Has quite a bit of power in the same way
and is inside the stable.
And is inside the stable, and is the one doing this and has the ability to turn smart or talking beasts back into dumb beasts.
If this is some kind of demon or like minor deity or something like that in the supposal, then would have maybe the ability to do those things, to punish in a supernatural kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
That's the most likely thing to me right now.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's good. After this, you would think that what really happens next is so interesting and so like Lewis, right? You have this really dramatic scene, and instead of revealing anything else, we take a pause to meet a brand new character.
Yes, that we get to know very quickly.
We get to know very quickly, and to really kind of come up with this really, what will continue to be a quite nuanced theological question, which we can't really dive too much into here. But Emeth, this officer, does come forward. He asks of Rishta Tarkhan, who's his senior officer, that he wants to go in. And, Rishta Tarkhan says, "What? You have nothing to do with any of this." He's like, whoa, like he actually uses appropriate logic here. Whoa. You said that Tash and Aslan are the same thing.
Yeah.
I worship Tash. So if Tash and Aslan are the same thing, then I guess I worship this Tashlan, which means this has everything to do with me because I'm a very devout Tash follower. And Rishta Tarkhan does not like this logic. Like many great bad guys, right, throughout these books, he has a disdain for sound logic and doesn't want this to happen. Emeth, though, eventually makes Shift swear that that no one is lying here, right, and that Tashlan is inside. And Rishta kind of pulls a Pontius Pilate here. He kind of washes his hands like, look, everybody hears this. Look, everybody's hearing. He's going out on his own volition.
He absolves himself of all blame.
I am not at all to blame for this, right? And this character of Emeth heads inside. Even get some help from the dwarves who kind of say, Rishta, why don't you let him in? I thought nothing's, you believe this
you
stuff.
said.
They kind of call him out on this, right? Their cynicism pays off a little bit here. And Emeth enters in, right? Eustace and Tyrion and Jill and everyone else are just watching. And like I mentioned, Jill even says he is worthy of a better god than Tash. I mean, this is a weird scene. This is a really odd scene to be included here. What do you think Lewis could possibly be doing?
The series is ending. He had this whole backlog of characters.
Oh, he just wanted to throw another character.
He just wanted to get one more in there.
I mean, but what is even...
To me, the helpful part of this was that demonstration of logic. Hey, you said they're the same thing. Why can't I go in there?
Okay.
And I think that may contribute in some way to things beginning to unravel. Because the more that, quote, Aslan is interacted with, the more everyone is going to realize this is not the Aslan that we know. And I wonder if this is to provide more evidence to that.
So maybe what we see a little bit from Emeth here is that maybe a way to engage with lies, right, with dishonesty is through logic, that logic can help kind of reveal some of these, false truths, right? That's good. And I don't know that Lewis is necessarily in this moment trying to particularly teach us something, right? He's always about trying to tell us a good story, first and foremost. It just seems so odd, too, especially because there's this character worshiping a false god for us as readers, right, that is really given a lot of humanity. A lot of empathy is given to him. We're supposed to find him sympathetic. And not only us as readers, we know that the good Narnians find him sympathetic, right? They say he is clearly supposed to be a good character here, right? Which I do think is also interesting for us because, like we've said before, and especially when we talked during the Horse and His Boy, some of the things that we said about Lewis's depiction of the Clormans, I do think a character like Emeth is a great defense of, no, Lewis, and obviously Erebus as well too, is that Lewis clearly is not writing off an entire culture here, because here we have this heroic character coming out here, and he's not unlike Erebus, he's not rejecting his culture. He's fully embracing it.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because this starts to make you wonder, is Lewis saying, well, it doesn't really matter who you believe. He's not. But like, at least at this part, you're starting to wonder, well, that's interesting. Because I thought the Clormans were all the bad guys who worship the false god.
Yeah.
We're going to have to obviously dive much more into this in later chapters. If that probably frustrates you and many of our listeners. I enjoy it, though.
As the episodes come out, sure. But once they're all out, then you can just click to the next
And just
one.
keep on going. Yeah. You don't have to finish this episode.
And
Go
I'll
to the
know
next
soon.
one.
I can go home and read the next chapter now.
He does go in, though. We hear some noises, and this other body, flies out. You already mentioned some thoughts as to what might be occurring there.
This is really interesting. I know they were prepared for Ginger to go in there, but I am confused how this character plays into it, and if they knew that someone was going to do this. Let's say that they're just tossing out another body with this armor.
Mm-hmm.
Are they doing that? Were they prepared with another? Did they have a body dressed up and they are just throwing it out and they're holding him inside? Or is there something supernatural going on that we don't know about? Is there some kind of lower level of magic? Or is it a portal? Could be a portal. Maybe he's suddenly aged and it's the same person but in a different body because he's changed.
Almost like in a Narnia thing, like maybe decades have passed for this character and he just comes back right at that moment.
Yeah.
We've literally seen this happen before, just the reverse with a different world.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe there's some kid walking out of a wardrobe right now.
Yeah.
In the late 40s.
I do want to come back to what could be, and again, I think we'll be able to answer this much more sufficiently in the future, but what could Lewis be doing by giving us this sympathetic Clorman here? He has rarely given us, again, Erebus for sure, but Erebus is rejecting all of Clorman throughout The Horse and His Boy, and other characters we get are usually not good people. Many of them are not. So why now? Why, with just a few chapters left to go? We've been around the Clormans for multiple books at this point. Why now?
I wonder if, as Narnia is ending, if Aslan is for everyone. And we're watching, this is in a way Aslan being revealed to everyone, no matter where they're from or what species they are.
Interesting.
Just a guess.
Yeah. I think we have to start thinking about the context of when this is occurring, the fact this is happening at the end of the world here, right?
And this is a character who clearly desires to know the power greater than himself, who he has been taught is Tash. And he wants to meet Tash, and he's fine if Tash and Aslan are the same thing. He wants to meet Tashlin in this case. And I think that is him seeking the truth.
Sure.
And he hopefully will find it, but we're not even sure if he's still alive.
We will definitely learn a little bit more about what happened. I'll say that. I won't say that he's alive.
Okay.
I won't say that he's dead either, but we'll be able to have, like I said, a deeper conversation here. Those are great thoughts, though, dude. I really like that a lot.
Good.
You're doing a great job. You always do a good job, but like some of the stuff that I know our listeners are going to really enjoy hearing some of your thoughts, having not gone further, because some of the things you're either right on the nose about, some of the things you're so wildly off that's going to be fun too, and other things you're like, wow, that's just great. That's not it, but that's imaginative, and that would also be cool too. So that's been so fun about this particular season. Well, the chapter pretty much ends right there. What does happen is that Tyrion jumps out. They're about to take a boar and throw or push the boar inside, and Tyrion's had enough. He jumps out. The seven friends of, not seven friends because those are the humans, but the seven heroes maybe of Narnia here, with two of them being human, I guess three, Tyrion, jump out and they say, we're here. Tyrion tells us exactly what he's here to do. He is here to prove that Tash is a foul fiend, the ape a manifold traitor, and that these Calormans are worthy of death. And then he calls all the true Narnians to his side.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends.
Really curious to see how this goes, because the fear is that they weren't going to join.
Yeah.
And they're also probably pretty terrified. This could go several different ways.
Yeah. Well, let's still have you take a guess about what could happen in the next chapter. The next chapter is chapter 11, The Pace Quickens. And Phil, in this chapter, the last battle begins.
Oh, good.
The last battle begins. Not the book, the last battle. This is,
Yes.
you can't, listeners can't see this, but I'm standing sideways right now, so you know that I'm italicizing last.
He's not standing.
I'm not.
We have very
italicizing
comfortable
it.
couches.
If it was italicized, I'd mean the book, but since it's not, it just means the actual last battle itself.
The actual last battle.
Yeah, the proper noun being the battle, not the proper noun being the book. This all makes a lot of sense in my head. I hope everyone else understood what I meant. It is late. It's time for us to wrap up. What do you think is going to happen here as the last battle begins?
Things are going to speed up. There's going to be a battle, and we'll probably get some more information about the body that came out.
I hope so.
Me too.
Well, before we go,
I'm curious if we go further up and further in.
Who knows?
Still not
At
yet.
some point.
It's going to be the last.
Still
It's
hasn't
going to be the
happened.
last word of the book, I bet. That's my
And
guess.
would you be would you be disappointed if we get to the end and the last, like, there's no mention of it until the last sentence is like, and then they went further up and further in. You're like, oh, like that's
it.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
Would you be upset?
Yes, I would be upset.
That's how 14-year-old me was with Rosebud. The first time I saw Citizen Kane.
Oh, it was just a slide.
And it wasn't because the movie was not good. It was because it'd been hyped up so much because it's like, one of the most famous movies ever made.
It's considered the greatest movie by some places.
Like AFI or something like that. It's good. It's not. I don't know.
Not the greatest.
All right, calm down, everybody. I guess you just have to call something the greatest movie.
No Sherlock Holmes too. I'll tell you that.
I feel like I hear more about Citizen Kane with like, oh, it's the Citizen Kane of blank movies. Like, that's the Citizen Kane of comic book movies. Like, it's like, have you seen Citizen Kane?
Have I?
No, I just like whenever someone says that.
When
I assume you've seen it, right?
I have seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. You knew about the sled, so obviously you had.
Yeah.
But I remember being like, oh, okay, cool. That wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, but all right, that works.
Yeah.
Would you be upset if further up and further in is just the sled?
Yeah. What if it's the name of the sled that Father Christmas?
The sled that the White Witch had.
The sledge.
Because she was always going further up and further in Narnia.
So we just named it that.
Well, Phil, why don't you read for us? We have an email from Miranda today, so why don't you read about this "Who Told" theory that she shares with us?
All right. You want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah, just read the whole thing for us.
Miranda says, "Hello, Daniel and Phil."
That's why I wanted you to read. All right, that's it. We're done. That's all we needed. No.
It's clearly been edited. Let me just refresh so that change goes away. Your podcast has been so fun to listen to throughout the years. I recently started listening again, and I love the way you set it up. As someone who's grown up with Narnia, it's been so fun to experience what it's like to read the story for the first time through Phil. My family and I live just north of Wheaton, so if you guys ever venture out to the Wade Center, you have fans here who'd love to say hello. Anyways, I was listening to you discuss the who told concept about Aslan dying for Edmund. Obviously, the children were there, and the evil ones who could have turned good. But there were a few characters you forgot about. The mice. They knew Aslan was dead and helped chew away his ropes. If they were anything like their descendant Reepicheep, they would not likely keep quiet about what happened that night. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Miranda.
I love this.
That's
I think
really
it's
good.
Great. No, this is totally a workable, feasible theory. It does seem as though it's not talked about a ton, but it does seem as though most people potentially have an understanding, like Miranda says, or like we said back in the podcast, and then what Miranda says about it coming from the mice, I think makes a lot of sense. I don't think this story would have gone out from all the bad guys that are there.
Yeah.
I don't think Susan and Lucy were just up and like telling everybody because, again, as I think I mentioned last time, it kind of makes Edmund look pretty terrible, even though, he's been forgiven, and that's kind of the whole point of redemption and the sacrifice. So I think it's the mice. We know Reepicheep can't keep a secret.
Oh, yeah.
And if these mice are anything like him,
This sounds very likely.
Or is this one of those things? Let me ask you about this. I got a Star Wars feeling here.
A bad feeling about this?
I have a good feeling about Miranda's theory. I have a bad feeling about uh, about me saying that all mice are exactly like Reepicheep, because this happens all the time in Star Wars, right? Where you and I talked about this in the expanded universe. There's like a character who does one thing, and so because that one character in a movie did one thing, there's just
Their entire species.
the entire
must do
species.
this.
So like we were for bedtime a few nights ago, we have this little like board book about Wookiees, and like a good portion of it is about how they always get angry playing games. I'm like, no, I thought that was just Chewbacca. Yeah. Like when Han said Wookiees don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose, it seems like he was kind of joking in that. Maybe I read that wrong. Like. Yeah. Maybe Chewbacca would totally do that, but like it seems like he is hyperbolizing for all of Wookiees what might just be true for Chewbacca. Mm-hmm. But now we've just decided that all of the species, same thing. There was like that little snout-nosed guy in A New Hope that with the goggles that tells on them. They
must all be spies.
The whole species. Funny.
That's exactly the one I was thinking about.
The whole species they like spying. I'm like, because we saw one guy spy. It's now that they all have to be spies.
It has been very helpful for me to have someone from another place ask questions about, for example, American culture. What's an American accent? Well, there's no American accent, just like there's no British accent. Yeah. There are all these different accents that might share a common trait, and you can't, there are things that Americans do that you can stereotype, but when you're actually familiar with the culture and how different everything is, it's really hard to assume that everybody's the same. And Star Wars is an interesting one because it is a made-up universe. Some of the names are just not that different from Latin. For example, Darth Sidious, Insidious. And the universe feels really fleshed out in certain parts, but then in other parts, when everyone in a species does something, it's tough.
And by the way, speaking of your accents, David Bates had reached out to us after, I don't remember which episode we talked about this in, but
I think it was the one that just came out while we're recording, which is 5.
I think it was 5 or 6. Yeah. It must have been
chapter 5.
Did you see this too?
I didn't.
Okay. He had said that we talked about different kind of dialects of British accents. And he had said that someone from Manchester is known as a Manchurian. So they have a Manchurian accent. I think we said like a Manchester Ian or something like that. But now we know a Manchurian. Looked it up. Not what the Manchurian Candidate is about. Okay. Because I was like, wait, I think I misunderstood that movie then. Yeah. But no, Miranda, this is a great theory. I do think that actually we can believe that maybe not all the talking mice are all chatty just because Reepicheep is chatty, but what backs this up is the fact that our mice in Last Battle were also very chatty as well too. Okay. So literally, no, Miranda's right that we have seen mice throughout this be chatty and talkative, so I think that we can probably assume that this has gone on. It might not be like well known, like it's not in the history books, right? That this happened, but it's kind of like maybe a legend or even a myth, if you will, of like this is the kind of thing people hear and they say, oh, we heard that Aslan actually died that night. You know,
they're the ones who squeak the truth.
And also, Miranda, thanks for the invitation. We do need to get out to Wheaton at some point.
That'd be nice.
We'd love to get out to the Wade Center at some point. We've got maybe in the next coming years we'll head over there. And get to see the Wade Center, and I know we've met some other people there as well too. So yeah, we really
and
appreciate
maybe
that.
Manchester while we're at it.
They're actually opposite directions from Virginia, Phil. I don't know if you know this. Actually, there's a part of Richmond called Manchester. So if that's the one you mean, we could drive through that on the way to Illinois.
There you go.
Yeah. All right.
That's what I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Just across the river.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it's across a different kind of pond.
That's right.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to end. Miranda, thank you again for your email. Thank you for your kind words and for listening. And I love this, that now we know exactly what happened that night and how everyone knows. Well, this episode was made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can listen to a bonus episode each month along with other rewards. And as always, special thanks goes to John Marr, Emily Wakefield, Ryan Smith, and Michelle Girondi for supporting us at our top tiers. If you have any listener feedback, you can always email us at thenarniapodcast@gmail.com. That's thenarniapodcast@gmail.com. Or leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. You can find all of our previous episodes, links, and book information at lampostlistener.com. As always, we also appreciate a review on Apple Podcasts because this helps other listeners find the show and join our read-through. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we'll be back next time with Chapter 11.
See you then.